In today's video, we head to Blackpool, where a dealer is robbed of a significant stash by a group of thieves who threaten him with a hammer. Although he told the police it was a random burglary and that he didn't recognize the attackers, he actually identified one of the men by his voice and eyes. Determined to get even, he gathers a crew and plans a brutal revenge. On April 10, 2023 at 2 a.m., Daniel Cunningham was awakened by a noise coming from downstairs. It sounded like a door opening, followed by footsteps in the kitchen. Still groggy and unsure, he listened as the footsteps paused and then resumed, this time heading directly up the stairs. Before he could react, 4 masked men were standing over him, one holding a hammer. One of them demanded, "We know it's here, we're only going to ask you once. Where's the gear?" Fearing for his family's safety, Daniel revealed the location of the stash. The men quickly grabbed it and fled. During the robbery, Daniel's girlfriend managed to call 999, and the police arrived shortly afterward. When questioned, Daniel claimed the robbers were after money and had left when they were interrupted. He insisted he didn't recognize any of them, prioritizing his family's safety. However, this wasn't entirely true. He had recognized one of the robbers. After the police left, Daniel started thinking about what to do next. A large amount of Class A drugs had been stolen, and he knew he needed to act. About an hour later, Daniel contacted his associates in Merseyside, urgently messaging Lee Clark to call him. Within minutes, Lee was on the phone with Daniel, who explained what had happened. Although all 4 men were masked, Daniel had recognized one by his eyes, voice, and height. It was John Hutchinson. "We need to find him," Lee responded, telling Daniel to leave it to him. Lee then reached out to Darren McCabe, a contact in Blackpool who had a talent for tracking people down. "Darren, I need an address for John Hutchinson. He might be hiding, but I need his location right now," he said. Darren, known for being well connected despite his constant money troubles, assured Lee he'd find Hutchinson. An hour later, Daniel Cunningham got a call from Lee Clark, who informed him, "John Hutchinson, the man you're after, is still in Blackpool." Daniel replied that he would need some backup. "I'm on my way up, and I'll pick up David Bond on the way," he said. Clark borrowed his girlfriend's Ford Fiesta and set off. By midday, Lee Clark and David Bond had met up with Daniel Cunningham. Clark mentioned that Darren McCabe would join them later in the evening to drive them to and from John Hutchinson's flat. "We're going to need some tools," he added. The group gathered a metal baton and a cut-off wooden pole, but their main weapon was a hammer, chosen deliberately as a symbol, a statement mirroring the earlier robbery. At 6:50 p.m., McCabe arrived and drove Cunningham, Clark and Bond to Hutchinson's flat. Armed with the hammer, metal baton and wooden pole, the trio approached the flat, ready to confront Hutchinson. Inside the flat, John Hutchinson was hiding out with a large bag of product. His plan was to lay low until things calmed down, then sell it. However, Cunningham, Clark and Bond had other ideas. They broke the hinge on the kitchen window and crawled inside. Alerted by the noise, Hutchinson tried to escape, but Bond struck him in the back with a hammer, and the others joined in, beating him mercilessly. Meanwhile, a neighbor saw the men break into the flat and called the police. After the beating, Hutchinson, now lying on the floor, revealed the location of the stolen stash. The trio grabbed the bag and fled to McCabe's waiting car, speeding off to Cunningham's house. After dropping them off, McCabe's first stop was the local pub, where he was spotted sitting at a table, counting money. When the police arrived at Hutchinson's flat, they found him bruised and silent, unwilling to say much. Despite his injuries, Hutchinson insisted he was fine and refused medical attention. Unbeknownst to him, he was suffering from internal bleeding and a fractured rib that had punctured his spleen. After the police left, Hutchinson collapsed and went into cardiac arrest at 8:40 p.m. An ambulance was called, but despite being rushed to the hospital, he died shortly after. Later that night, Clark and Bond traveled to Merseyside. The next day, they exchanged texts. Bond messaged, "Lad, my foot's killing me, ha ha." Clark responded, "That took me back to the good old days." Bond replied, "My bird's fuming, ha ha," but reassured him, "She's all right, just got a cob on. I said I only drove." Cunningham then joined the conversation, thanking Clark. "Thanks, brother. Thanks for everything. You and the others. Tell them thank you." Bond ended the chat by reminding Clark to get rid of the hammer and put everything in a fresh JD bag. That evening, the gang learned about Hutchinson's death, and their camaraderie quickly turned to fear. Bond anxiously asked Clark, "What if I did it?" Clark replied, "A hammer to the back can't do that, bro." And indeed, it had. A hammer blow had fractured Hutchinson's rib, puncturing his spleen, leading to internal bleeding and eventually cardiac arrest. A few days later, Clark texted Bond, "Cunningham has been arrested in Blackpool." Before they could come up with a plan, the police moved swiftly. Within minutes, they arrested Clark at his home and Bond at his mother's house, both in Merseyside. Around the same time, McCabe was also apprehended in Blackpool. With Hutchinson's murder, the police needed to piece together who was involved and the events leading up to it. An autopsy revealed that Hutchinson's death was caused by a blow to the back, which triggered a series of events leading to cardiac arrest and death. CCTV footage from outside Hutchinson's flat captured 3 armed men entering the building. The police also learned that Hutchinson, known for stealing from dealers to support his own habit, had been the target of a revenge attack. The investigation uncovered crucial evidence from Hutchinson's phone, revealing text messages that helped the police identify those involved. One message, sent by a friend, Danny McManus, at around 12:30 a.m. on April 10th, asked if Hutchinson was up for graft. Hutchinson later met with Ben Hudson, and it was then that the plan to raid Cunningham's stash was set in motion. Detectives issued an APB for a grey Ford Fiesta with the registration SG18, believed to have travelled from Merseyside to Blackpool on the day of the attack. After tracing the car's owner and connections, the police arrested Cunningham, McCabe, Clark and Bond. Through multiple interviews, the 4 were charged with manslaughter and murder, with the most incriminating evidence being the text messages between Clark, Bond and Cunningham, as well as their GPS locations. After a trial at Preston Crown Court, Daniel Cunningham, Lee Clark, David Bond, and Darren McCabe were all found guilty by the jury. Daniel Cunningham, 33, was convicted of manslaughter and received an 18-year prison sentence. He also received a concurrent 6-year sentence and an additional 2-year sentence for dealing in Class A drugs. Lee Clark, 33, was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 27 years. He also received a concurrent 9-year sentence for Class A drug dealing. David Bond, also 33, was found guilty of murder and was given a life sentence with a minimum term of 24 years. He was additionally sentenced to 6 months for drug dealing, to run concurrently. Darren McCabe, 47, was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Joanna White, senior crime prosecutor for CPS Northwest, stated that Cunningham, Clark and Bond were willing to go to extreme lengths, including committing murder, to reclaim stolen Class A drugs from their operation. Their brutal act of revenge led to Hutchinson's death. Although McCabe did not participate in the physical attack, he played a crucial role by locating Hutchinson and the stolen product, and accepting substantial payment for his services. During the trial, the prosecution presented telephone evidence detailing the planning of the attack and the acknowledgement of their actions after Hutchinson's death. The jury's verdicts on murder and manslaughter were based on this evidence. The CPS remains dedicated to collaborating with the police to dismantle gang activities and ensure justice is served. So, what's to be made of this case? It's a complex situation in a gritty, violent world that everyone involved chose to inhabit. The police had determined that Hutchinson was a drug user with a reputation for stealing from dealers to support his addiction. What wasn't immediately clear was just how well connected Cunningham was. Once Hutchinson robbed Cunningham, he was essentially marked for retribution. Clark and Bond faced murder charges, while Cunningham and McCabe were charged with manslaughter. Even though Bond's hammer blow was the one that led to Hutchinson's death, it was surprising that the CPS didn't pursue a joint enterprise charge for all three in connection with the murder. This detail had me re-examining the case files and police reports, but it appears to be correct. The charges were set before the trial began. Clark and Bond were charged with murder, while Cunningham and McCabe faced manslaughter charges. McCabe's 16-year sentence for his role in locating Hutchinson and facilitating the retrieval of the stolen drugs is significant. Despite not participating in the actual attack, his actions were crucial. This case stands out as particularly unusual, but it underscores a harsh reality. In this dangerous game, pushing your luck can either cost you your life or a significant portion of your time. It begs the question, does money hold more value than your freedom? That's our video for today. If you like our content, don't forget to check out our channel. We've got many more stories from the underworld to share with you. See you in the next one.